today, and thanks for watching. I'm Paul Murray. Welcome to the show, a show where we don't just tell you what happened today, but hopefully by the end of our chat, they'll have a better idea of what really happened today. Great panel for you. Janine Perrott will be here, and we'll also be joined by Gary Hardgrave in Brisbane. There's a lot of politics to get to, but there's a lot of other news to get to, and I'm always keen to know what you think. The hashtag is PMLive on Twitter. You can follow me personally on Twitter at @PMOnAir. You can also send me an email directly. There's no filter. They come straight to me. Feel free. It is pmlive@skynews.com.au. And if you're on Facebook, just go searching for Paul Murray Live. You'll like the show. If you want to get any highlights of our show or the infuriating conversation that PVO just had with the Special Minister of State, Gary Gray, I don't think I've ever yelled at the television as much as I just did then. You can check it out at skynews.com.au. Not a PVO. He's awesome. Special Minister of State. Happy to spend other people's money and doesn't quite understand why. It's infuriating. Now, tonight on the program there, as I say, there's a lot to get to, including the economy, interest rates. But I wanted to focus on something that was deeply personal and deeply human. On Friday in Queensland, as the floods rolled through, there was a car that was swept away and, sadly, a woman who died in that. She struggled for her own life. This is Jane Sheehan. I want to show you Jane Sheehan. Now, Jane was in the car. She was swept away by the floodwaters, and there were people who were watching on the banks paying some attention to all of this. About 5 people did jump into the water and did their best to try and save her life. Sadly, they weren't able to do that. Those people are fantastic. But there were plenty of other people who saw the demise of this woman. And their reaction wasn't to jump into the water, wasn't even panic that this was going on in front of them. Their decision, pull out the mobile phone and press record. To record the death of somebody who potentially you could have helped. Now, who knows if a 6th, 7th, 8th or 12th rescuer would have been able to save her life. Clearly, it's a dangerous situation for the people who jumped in as well. But there were 5 people who didn't give a stuff about their own safety. They just saw that this woman was in trouble and they did their best. Sadly, they couldn't save her life. But what sort of a person sees somebody die before their very eyes and their reaction is to film it? What is it about, not a generation of people, but just a certain selfish soul who rolls around in every street of every suburb, in every city and every state of our country? People who think that the life around us is a 3D movie that just plays out for their own amusement. These are the people who don't understand that when there's a horrific car crash that's holding you up in traffic getting to work, somebody's very hurt gets put in a hospital, it gets put in an ambulance and spend months in hospital. These are the people who just don't understand what the consequences of gun crime are. These are the people who couldn't care less if people were truly in trouble. It's all just background noise. Unless it involves them or their families or their friends or people they know, it's just fodder. It's just fodder to be filmed. And while this is the extreme example, I've talked about this before on the air where I've seen fights between mates late at night, not mine, but I've seen them, fights late at night when police get involved trying to break up the mates. And the other friends, rather than trying to get in the middle and stop their friends fighting, they just take a couple of steps back and start filming the whole thing. I don't quite understand. When do you go back and watch the video of the woman drowning or your friends fighting or somebody else in trouble? What do? Do you post it on Twitter and say, check this out? OMG, this is terrible? Do you want the credit for being there first? Why don't we just do what is the basic human thing? Somebody's in trouble, I'll do my best to help you. If it's too dangerous, I'll feel terrible for you as I watch it happen and I'm helpless and I can't do anything. There is no part of my soul that would think the first thing I should do is reach for my mobile phone and film a woman as she is drowning. Those people are disgraceful. They are genuinely horrible people. Even if they think they were just innocent bystanders, they're part of a bigger problem. A problem that exists in lots of elements of our society, but it's the one where we don't understand that there are other people with just as many valid reasons to be on this planet who we should be taking care of, not just watching along when something terrible happens to them. Keen to know what you think. The hashtag PMLive, the email's pmlive@skynews.com.au. It is honestly a shameful moment in what was already a terrible situation. All right, now let's turn our attention to the latest news, including the interest rate. No news today. That's Sharon McKenzie. Sharon, good evening to you.
You could call it that, couldn't you, Paul?
A little bit strange. Our lead story is nothing. Lots of interesting reactions to my comments a couple of seconds ago about the type of people who just stand there with mobile phones and film things. In this case, a woman who was drowning before their very eyes, but not actually just throw the phone away, jump in and become part of the rescue efforts. There's a few people that are starting to push back. We'll talk about that with our panel shortly. But I did quickly want to talk about politics. Today was the first day back of federal parliament, and while it was interesting to see, a couple of things stood out to me as being particularly noteworthy. Question time only went for about 40 minutes today. A series of condolence motions were passed by the Parliament, including for a former Governor-General, Sir Zalman Cowan, who passed away earlier in the year. So that took up a fair chunk of time. And then eventually we got to question time. So here we go. There are so many things to have a go at the Prime Minister about. There are so many interesting and fascinating elements to get in there with. So what did Tony Abbott decide was the blockbuster question to ask after the summer break? Behold.
My question is to the Prime Minister, and I refer her to Treasury modelling that shows that the carbon tax will cause a $32 billion hit to the Australian economy and a $600 a year cut in real wages by 2020. And I ask, why did the Prime Minister break the promise she made to the Australian people at the last election, namely there will be no carbon tax under the government I lead?
The Prime Minister has the call.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. In answer to the Leader of the Opposition's question, it is clear that he means to go on as he did in 2011 with misleading claims and continued negativity as we ready our economy for the future, including for a clean energy future.
Seriously? We're back here again after the laws have actually passed and 6 months before the carbon tax actually takes hold? The first question is exactly the same type of question that you asked all through 2011. Tony, it's time for the pony to get a different trick. I get how successful the carbon tax thing was last year, but this is a whole new year. If you don't have other things on the shopping list to go after the government about, it is going to be an excruciating year. As I say, find a new trick. What do you reckon? Hashtag PM Live. Email pmlive@skynews.com.au. We'll take a break and discuss that and the rest of the day's news. We're fired up this Tuesday night. Why not? Because we're live across the country, only on Sky News. Thank you very much for watching and thank you for the spirited discussion on Twitter. You can follow me, PM On Air. You can follow our show, PM_live, and make sure you use the hashtag of PM Live. Joining me at the desk, Janine Perrott, who did a wonderful job stepping in on Thursday. Thank you for that. Tough day for the family, but as always, you're delightful in there.
Oh, thank you. Good to be back and glad you're back.
Well, this is it. Now, of course, for you, this is sort of grand final day, isn't it? Rates Day, Sky Business Channel.
Oh, I said it was a bit like the Melbourne Cup, wasn't it? People stopped at 2:30. Anti-climax.
But isn't that weird thing today? And in today's news, nothing happened.
Nothing happened.
Yeah,
nothing happened
weird.
again today. Yeah.
All right, a man who hit it out of the park this afternoon, despite the dreaded lurgy, in Queensland is Gary Hardgrave. He's the drive announcer on 4BC. How are you, mate?
Well, look, I'm glad to be with you.
No,
Yes.
Nice to see you. All right, now, guys, before we get into the politics and the whole issue of do you film tragedies as they're taking place, let's talk about the rates cut overall. Janine, I suppose, putting the business reporter hat on, did they get it right doing nothing today?
You never know. You can only tell in hindsight. Certainly small business, there was a lot of demand for a rate cut because the retail figures out yesterday showed the worst figures in 27 years. Terrible Christmas trading season. So there's a lot of people that would be arguing for it. And apart from the media and people who wanted to bash the banks for not passing it on. However, there is another side. It's trumped a bit by the fact there's very strong US jobless figures. There are signs that the US recovery is coming. Some people believe that even Europe is starting to bottom out, though Greece could fall over again. So there's a bit of a feeling of keep their powder dry, best to have it up their sleeve and wait and see how things go in the next month.
In the Reserve Bank Governor's statement, they said that basically one of the reasons we didn't do it now is all of the numbers are basically on trend. Does that mean that the economy is going well, or just if the trend is this and it's just not faster than that, then somehow we don't pull the lever?
Well, I hate to tell you, it's that two-speed economy thing again. Unfortunately, it evens out. I mean, the problem is, of course, by not cutting rates, the Australian dollar soared higher. That puts pressure on the slow speed of the Australian economy. So it is a dilemma.
Now, Gary, obviously the double-edged sword in all of this is that there's good news for people who've just got the money in term deposits, the self-funded retirees, but generally speaking, did they do the right thing today?
Well, I'd say no, because I'm a mortgage owner and that's all I care about. I'm all right, Jack, Paul. But look, as Chubby Checker would say if he was here, how low can you go? I mean, if they were to dip down to 4 today and next month they needed to do something extraordinary, do they go down to 3.75? And maybe that's what it's all about. It is about keeping that powder dry, sufficient to see whether the bottom has been reached in Europe, in America, those two economies. I mean, that's 50% of the world's economy, Europe and America. So if the bottom's been reached, then maybe Australia goes as low as it now has gone, and 4.25. But I still reckon 5 cents in every dollar you lend out is still pretty good rate of return for any of the banks myself.
If it makes you feel better, it's called a pause, not a stop to rate cuts.
Oh, okay. No, excellent. Now, I'm willing to ask the idiot question here. Free kick on Twitter. Is
there clause in those paws, I was just thinking, but anyway.
Yeah. Is that now we have this situation where the banks have said the cost of finance is so high for us that we can't at the moment pass on the full rate cuts. If there was a rate cut today of, say, 0.25%, the ANZ Bank would have taken 10 days. They've announced that it'll be not the Tuesday but the following Friday when they'll announce what they're going to do with the rates. Is there an argument or is there an instrumentality that if you know they're not going to pass on the full rate, that basically almost like inviting people over for dinner, you know they're always going to be an hour late, so tell them that the party is an hour earlier, do you actually end up cutting rates by 0.5% knowing that they'll only end up passing on half of it?
I don't think that's an economical strategy.
I
can't see them doing that because, I mean, look, I suppose you could, but look, the Reserve Bank is independent. They set cash rates. That's the official cash rates. There are a lot of other issues, as Gary pointed out, than the straight mortgage cut. There's the competition. There should be more competition in the banks. They should cut. But look, it's a nice idea. But what, do you cut 1% to go 0.5%? Then they'd figure out you're banking on that. We do it. I'm not sure it's a strategy.
I'm sure the economists have just screamed at the television, but it was one of those things of just trying to put it out there, see what happens. All right, now let's talk about the politics of the day and what I think was Tony Abbott's bad first question. He decided to go in for the carbon tax today. Now, Gary, I don't disagree. Carbon tax is desperately unpopular. People, generally speaking, don't want it and don't see it as the great cure for either climate change and certainly either the economy. But fair dinkum, first question of a brand new year?
It's the poltergeist, mate. It's just going to keep coming back at you out of your television set if you can afford to turn it on after the 1st of July. I mean, fair dinkum. Look, I thought I'd forgotten all about carbon tax till Tony raised it today, so I'm so pleased he brought
lucky. But it's that thing where I understand, Julie Bishop was banging on about it before. I understand how potent it is as a weapon, but don't you have to show at the start of the year we're going to go them on something else? We're going to build another case as to why this is a bad government,
but
not
Paul,
just push home the single example that I think's been well prosecuted.
But the Prime Minister said it was all about the economy, right? And all that Tony is making the point, and I've been at a few community events over the last week or so, and people keep raising this thing. So, frankly, Pulse of the Nation stuff suggests to me that people are worried about what this thing represents. So Abbott mentions it, he gets it out of the way, it's a reasonable tactic, at least he says, I haven't forgotten it, then moves on to whatever happened next. I just think he gets it out of the way.
Yeah, it's that thing. I mean, I think he should have found something else to go the government on from day one.
The mining tax, that's going to come up again. Well, there's another
But do you think he missed the opportunity or capitalised on the great one by saying...
I got over the whole carbon tax debate late last year, and I do think there is a bit of fatigue over it. I'm not saying, Gary, that it's not a valid point and an issue in the electorate, but I think I'd be holding it off for the election to keep going, because you do actually start to get the point, if I hear it again, I'm going to scream.
Well, that's maybe it's that thing where we're all...
It's not coming in for 6 months.
Well, no, but that's the thing, that it's like find something else to talk about rather than just the veiled leadership stuff. There's got to be stuff about the competence, or lack of it at times, when it comes to the government that you can go after. I mean, what happened to the idea of basically the gotcha question that you started Question Time with, the one that you'd researched over Christmas, the one that you'd actually put some effort into, rather than just repeating what the polls have said all summer long? We don't like the carbon tax. It's nuts to me. Also, something that's worth noting is that Peter Slipper, he decided to run the parliament slightly differently. There's the nonsense of him deciding to wear robes and not wigs. Honestly, who cares? But what is also interesting here is that he's not going to warn people if he's going to boot them out of the parliament. He just will. Joe Hockey found out about that today. Gary, as a man who's sat in the parliament, knowing that the Speaker will just say, "Oi, you, out," would that make you change your behaviour?
I think Peter's actually had a pretty good day today. I actually texted him a message an hour before Parliament sat saying, please wear the dead sheep on your head, but he didn't do it. He didn't fall for it. But look, in all seriousness, I think Mr. Speaker is right. He's laid the rules out. If you don't understand what he said today, you'll find out. He doesn't believe he has to issue a warning to send you out for an hour in the sin bin. He will warn you if he wants to send you out for a day, and if you've done it multiple times in the same session, it could be for 3 days, a week or whatever. I love the idea of the main committee, which is a shadow chamber of the House of Representatives being called the Federation Chamber. And I saw that and I thought, gee, Peter, that actually is a wonderful initiative, because it's been this sort of a committee room where people went and debated the things that the House of Representatives didn't find time for. So he's not off to a bad start. Look, I think I know him well enough to know that he understands people parody him and send him up. I don't think he's as big a parody as some people like to think. Peter is a fellow who's had a long time in the Parliament, and I think as Speaker he's going to do his darndest to reinvent himself and show some good class about him. I hope he does. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah. Now, what about the wigs and gowns stuff? I mean, that's the easy giggles and gags to be made. To be honest, it's that thing where if he wants to wear it, fine and fair enough, but I just don't understand. No more or less respect comes as a result of it. Plenty of speakers have been able to sit there and throw members of Parliament out just wearing a suit.
This is a classic media beat-up. The Daily Telegraph in Sydney runs a story of the man with the sheep's head on his head today saying he's going to do it.
Never going to wear it.
He didn't wear it, he didn't do it. We're arguing about it. We're arguing about something he didn't do. It's irrelevant. I'm with Gary. The main thing is he threw out Joe Hockey without warning anybody. I love it. If it makes them behave better, but do we really think it will?
With that.
Yeah, all right.
I reckon.
All right, that's the politics of the day. I'm not doing the leadership tonight. It's all pretty obvious what's going on there. All right,
who's the leader still?
Yeah.
What time is it?
Flip a coin, we'll wait and see. Don't worry, the texts will all start shortly. All right, we'll take a break. Plenty more to talk about, including I want to get what the guy's perspective is on these people who filmed a woman as she was drowning in the floods in Queensland. We're live across the country, only on Sky News. Thank you very much for watching. I'm here in conversation with Gary Hardgrave in Brisbane and Janine Perrott from the Sky Business Channel here at the desk. Remember, the comments can come to me directly via Twitter on the hashtag of PMLive and emails pmlive@skynews.com.au. The highlights of this program will play tonight on Multiview. You press the red button and watch us after the show, and you can catch up as well on skynews.com.au. Now, guys, a couple of images that I wanted to show from the Brisbane Times website has shown some of the clean-up operations that are now in place when it comes to the flood operation. Worth having a look at the moment, and certainly those photos, if you haven't seen them already, are worth jumping into online at brisbanetimes.com.au. Some of the flood-affected areas, heartbreaking stuff to see. And in and amongst all of this is this story that I mentioned at the start of the show. This is the story of a woman who was trapped in the flood waters. There is conjecture about whether or not drove a car into the flood waters at a time when she should or shouldn't have, but the point was that once she got herself into trouble, close to half a dozen people jumped in to physically help her. However, there were plenty of people who were on the banks and they were willing to stand there with mobile phones and not just see it, not just be concerned by it, but didn't jump in and help. They held up their mobile phones and started filming things. Gary, I know that there's a lot of little elements of the story that are conflicting, but surely we can agree there's something wrong with people that when they see someone in peril, and it doesn't even have to be mortal peril, if you can do something to help and you see other people who don't know that person jumping in to help, your immediate reaction should be, what can I do, not how do I film this?
Mate, I just don't know what is going on in the minds of some people. And Roma is such a great part of the world. I would have, if I could have typecast the people who live around Roma, it would have been the get in, can do, kind of rolling your sleeves up, help out and mate type. So, I'm with you. The big question is about those who didn't. Look, I understand there's no good jumping into a dangerous situation and yourself being in peril, and you could have ended up with 6 people needing to be rescued or 6 people drowning. We've heard of those stories. I understand that. But to add to the callousness of it, to think that somehow or other, your mobile phone footage was now downloadable on YouTube, so you can say, hey, buddy, have a look at what I filmed, or here's this person drowning, 1, 2, 3, that's it, she's gone. I mean, what are people thinking, for God's sakes? I mean, I think anybody who's flogging this footage around needs the metaphoric and perhaps maybe an actual swift uppercut straight into the jaw, I reckon. Fair dinkum. It's wrong. Wrong.
Absolutely. Now, look, a few people pushed back on Twitter, and I got a few texts from people in the business who said, well, hang on, what about news cameramen? I mean, there are differences. The professional detachment of a professional who's sent into a scenario to film it, it's the classic quandary of a professional cameraman, which is, when I see danger, what do I do? Do I help or do I film? I understand that. But when we're talking about the real world, and when you're not working, you're out and about, how anyone's reaction is to film it. As I said, there are people who seem to view the world as just a 3D movie that they're watching, that everyone else is just noise.
Well, just to clarify on the professional cameraman, and having been a foreign correspondent and been in disaster zone, even professionals often have that dilemma where you were looking and say, you know, I'm doing my job, but if I wasn't doing my job, is there more I can do? So, yes, I mean, that's our job, but even we go through that. So it's even more unfathomable that anybody not in a professional role would do it. And is there an argument that it's a generation where it is up on YouTube, that they think a news organisation will buy it, that there is a demand? I mean, are they doing it for that? You wonder what their motivation is.
But also it's that thing, though, where I think because we're all so used to, and, you know, I love all of the modern technology and the toys and the Facebooks and all of that stuff. But a mate of mine was telling me when he heard about this story that there literally was a scenario where there was a party, somebody got stabbed, and parents couldn't get involved to actually help the victim because all of the friends were standing around, not helping, but taking photos. I mean, there's this thing where, Gary, I don't think people necessarily understand how callous an act it is just stepping back and taking a photo and not trying to get involved.
Well, particularly when it's something personal like that. I mean, when I worked for the Seven Network 300 years ago, every time we went to do anything at an airport, the cameraman would always film the takeoffs and the landings, just in case, you know, and it's just what they did, right? But if you're at a party, if you're at a situation where someone's drowning before your eyes and your first instinct is to hit the record on your iPhone or something, I just don't know how you can live with it within yourself. Look, I've watched accidents happen before me. I've got out of the car, I've got myself involved, you direct traffic, all this sort of stuff. What are we going to do? You know, in fact, for drivers, this is serious because if a driver then says, my first responsibility is not to assist the person, not to direct traffic and keep the place safe so no one else gets hurt, but to take footage of everything that happens, well, they're going to find themselves in trouble. So I just think we all just have to give ourselves a bit of a shake and think, what would we like others to do if we were in that situation? Fair dinkum.
Absolutely correct. I mean, absolutely a great way of putting it. And look, a lot of people want to push back too and say, it's the media's fault, you're always asking us to post photos of this.
Oh, that's too easy. That's a cop-out.
Well, no, exactly. Well, that's the thing. I mean, that's the bang on Twitter. The point is that it's not a binary thing. It's not all or nothing. There's a difference between take a photo of something when nobody's in danger or you're out of danger versus someone's in trouble in front of you. What's your human response? The fact that people's human response is to film something or take a bloody photo.
But it's interesting you say that if there's a life-threatening situation, but I think there's probably a generation now so used to that's not their first thing. Can I do this, or is this just going to be a fun YouTube video?
Yeah, good point.
I mean, sometimes, you know, those are not the decisions. That's their first choice.
Let's wait for it to go viral.
And then we wait and see if it was serious.
All right, keen to know what you think. This one's important. This is one of those ones that's one of those chances for us to go, OK, this was wrong, let's take half a step back, and that's as far as the line is. All right, keen to know. Hashtag PM Live, emails pmlive@skynews.com.au. Follow me directly, PM on air. All right, guys, I want to talk about a New South Wales MP. She's been an MP for a very long time in the state parliament and in the federal parliament. Janelle Saffron is her name. She believes that we should increase the unemployment benefits to being the same of the pensions because clearly people that are on an unemployment benefit end up having not just the disadvantage of no job, but then the financial disadvantage of not receiving the same amount of money as the pension. Now, I'm a little bit old school. I'm a little bit hardline on these sorts of things, Gary, which is I'm fine if unemployment benefits are brought up to the level of pensions because then, OK, you're going to have some form of a living wage. If you have a mental illness, physical impairment, my big heart believes we should take care of you for as long as possible. But if you are someone who is on the wrong side of that line, unemployment should be something that isn't there forever. Maybe it should be, OK, we'll increase it, but you can only take it for 6 months every 2 years. You can't sit on it continuously for 2 years. what would you do to change the dial?
Yeah, well, one of the things I'd look at is some of the American examples, but the fact that somebody of the Labor caucus is worried about unemployment doesn't surprise me, given the way the political cycle is at the moment. But, so maybe it's a bit self-serving. But in some parts of America, which has a pretty heartless system in some parts, as I understand it, there is a limit. It basically says you feed in part of your wage as you are working into your social security, and you draw that out up to 6 months, 40 weeks, I think is another figure in some other states, and then it stops. Now, that's pretty heartless, everyone will say, but boy, gee, to put a bit of pepper on your tail and make you get off it and go and look for jobs.
Well,
That's
actually,
what I
Gary,
think, so.
the jobs have got to be there. Having lived in the States, it is a harsh system. It's why they have so many homeless. At the end of the day, the unemployment runs out, and we saw in the GFC, people just had nowhere to go. There are no jobs, they don't. And that's the downside of this, without wanting to sound like a bleeding heart liberal. There is a limit in the US on how long. No matter how long you've paid taxes, you cannot get unemployment benefits forever. So there are, middle-class people with families who, after 2 years, that's it. They've got nowhere else to go, and unemployment's at 8%. Australia's different because we have pretty well full employment now, so this is an interesting time to have this argument.
But that's
true. And can I just make it very plain? I'm not touting that we have to go that way. I'm just saying let's look at that and see whether there's some elements of that we should consider in Australia. That's all I was saying.
And that's the thing. I'm probably the one in this chat who's put the toughest option on the table worth talking about, is that, obviously it's not every person that's unemployed is a dole bludger. I hate that stuff. But there is a collection of people who clearly have worked out how to play the system. The way they play the system is this is what they do instead of doing a job. Now, clearly, you go after, you shake the tree, you make sure those people don't abuse the system. The same has to be done for other pensions.
I was going to say, for other benefits.
Exactly. But don't you have to have a scenario where you turn around and say, look, it mightn't be the job you want to do, but it's the one that's available. And in the same way...
we were moving towards that you have to, that they do check on you further. I mean, as I say, we're in full employment. They have been moving towards that. There are people who will always rule the system, but I think there's no excuse at the moment. I mean, you might have to move city, do you want to go and drive a truck in the Pilbara? But yes, we should get tougher, but I'm not sure yours isn't a little bit tougher. A bit un-Australian to use that term.
But I got to say that in southeast Queensland, you want to talk about the 3-speed economy. I think we gave up on 2. It's definitely 3, they reckon. But in southeast Queensland, they're getting people who are saying, I know you're going to cancel my dole if I don't show up for employment appointments, job appointments. So that's fine, it doesn't matter. When I've been penalised, I'll go back on the dole again, rather than moving to central Queensland, 1,000 kilometres into the country, where the mines are wanting to import workers from other countries because they can't find locals. So, go figure. It's something a bit interesting at the moment.
At the very least, I think there's a chat to be had, and it's interesting that it's a backbench MP and the Prime Minister ruled all of this out, saying, no, everything, keep the system as it is, quick, move on, let's talk about something else. I think there is a potential bigger chat to be had there, and I'm keen for it to continue now online. Hashtag PM Live, emails pmlive@skynews.com.au. All right, guys, there is a teenage girl who has successfully won a payment of up to $12,000 in compensation because she worked in a restaurant. The person who she worked for sexually harassed her. We're talking about the pinching on the bum, the inappropriate stuff that was being said, and quite rightly, he's now been forced to pay up $12,000. Now, I think that anyone who would do that in the workplace is insane, and I'm more than happy for those people to have to pay whatever they have to pay as a fine. I've never quite understood it. In terms of sexual harassment and not where the line is, but how big the problem is, this era versus 10, 15, 20 years ago, a lot of people want to say that there's been no change. It's pretty much the same. It's just now it's rough talk rather than other things.
Well, it's interesting you say it. As you know, I have a zero tolerance thing, and we had the very famous case of Mark McGuinness, where in a lot of business they came out and supported him. And can I say, this comes... what a brave girl, too. For a kid to do that, I mean, a lot of women, adults, don't want to go through that. It's a lot of pressure. She said she cried, so I think she did a terrific thing. But, yeah, look, I can assure you that 20 years ago it was much worse. It was much more blatant. But, hey, it's still going on. Can I mention that Star City Casino in Sydney is currently in all kinds of trouble over a culture of sexual harassment. And strangely enough, if you've got a manager who does it, there's now allegations of drug use, other things. The point is, whether you like it or not, whether you're a dinosaur from the old era that says, oh, what's a bit of a tickle, or, I just said she had good tits, whatever it is, the fact is these are the rules, and that's why people lose their job. And whether you like, whether it's just political correctness or not, these are the rules. You're in a management position, have to abide by them.
It's always that thing. In a modern workplace, wherever it happens to be, I always think it's about the comfort of the two people in the situation. This is a very different era where people are far more liberal about the things they talk about. If that's the conversation that happens between two people who want to have that, then fine, fair enough.
Except if you're a manager.
Okay, yeah, but if you're a manager, and let alone if you're the boss, grabbing people on the bum and all the rest of it. Seriously, Gary, I've never got it. I've never understood why blokes do it.
No, and I can't help the thick edge of the male gender, and indeed there are some women who do this as well. Either way, none of this is welcome. And I'm just of a generation that would never have allowed myself to be in a situation like this. You joke about Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky. We hear about the 69-year-old woman who said 50 years ago, she was in a thing with John F. Kennedy in a book,
There's a shock.
Well, yeah, absolutely. The women who weren't, can they please put up their hand and let us know? But look, in all seriousness, this sort of stuff just can't happen in the modern workplace. And I'm not into nanny state at all. I just think blokes have got to correct themselves. Companies, boards are risk averse to this sort of stuff, and with good reason. You talk about McGuinness, this particular case, all of these other matters. I can't understand how anybody who wants to be a manager in this era can allow this to happen. I think we've actually got to go the other way. We've got to shepherd younger people through this. If we see a young bloke doing the wrong thing to a young girl or vice versa in a workplace, we've got to crack down on it, because people, regardless of gender, have got to be able to be professional in their professional environment, and any of these unwanted advances have got to be dealt with. Simple as that, as far as I'm concerned.
And I agree, and I just want to say, because I talk to a lot of businessmen, there is no doubt that there are females dressed provocatively, still put the hard word on, and they say, I didn't touch her, it's a bit of flirting. You know what? At the end of the day, you get paid the big bucks. Just resist it. Even inappropriate talk and flirting is bad.
If you want your fix, go and watch On the Buses on UK TV.
Or Benny Hill.
Yeah, that's what fired all of that up. With that wonderful thought, the man about the house moment, we'll take a break. We're live across the country, old governor, here on Sky News. Thank you very much for watching. I'm here in conversation with Janine Perrott from the Sky Business Channel. You can watch her show at 6:30 Eastern every night. It is also replayed at around about this time, but watch it live rather than in the repeat. And Gary Hargrave, who is the drive announcer on Radio 4BC. I'm happy to give the mates a leg up, but not in this 1 hour on the TV.
Look, it's confusing to be up against myself, I've got to tell you.
It's weird, isn't it?
And the viewers who ask me how I do it, I do wonder.
Yeah, all right. Now, a couple of things I wanted to get to that probably not as heavy and important as we've discussed this evening, but a couple of things, including, I just think this is the most awesome thing I've seen all day. This is an 18-month-old baby playing ping pong. Now, it's in the UK. This footage was served up by the mother, who is apparently some sort of a professional ping pong player. 18 months old, doing pretty well. Ellen now wants to talk to the kid. Is that cool or cute, Janine?
I don't know. It's sitting on the ping pong table.
But it's hitting you.
Well, that's true. I can't do it on a tennis court even at my age. I don't know.
I think that stuff's awesome.
That's the best thing you've seen in ages. Sorry.
Well, it's the best thing today. It's cute. It's a kid playing ping pong. Is there something wrong with me, Gary? I don't know. Now, I also mentioned this too. I have a bit of a pop culture announcement to make. Do we have a breaking news bar we can get up here? Now, as you know, the Star Wars movies, massive beyond all that. I'm one of those super nerds who grew up watching it 700 times. I loved going and seeing it when it was re-released in 1997. I have got the VHS box set, the DVD box set, the Blu-ray box set, the extended box set. I've got every possible version. I was a kid who played more often with those figures than any books or anything like that. I'm into Star Wars,
we get that, yeah.
However, I've had enough of just the pointless re-releases and the gouging of cash from George Lucas. This week they're going to re-release the first episode, which was the crappiest of all of the films, as a 3D release. Film Inc. have written it off as just useless 3D, and I'm not going to see it. And this is a big thing for me because I feel like I'm somehow betraying my childhood not to see the latest, biggest, bestest thing to do in the Star Wars universe. Gary, I have a simple question for you. 3D Star Wars Does it float your boat? Because as heartbreaking as it is for a lifelong super nerd to say, I'm not seeing this movie.
Well, Paul, I congratulate you on growing up and moving on.
I wouldn't be too rash, Gary.
Mate, I wouldn't mind seeing it, actually.
No! God, don't do it! Don't. If you want to go and see a good movie on Thursday, go and see Any Questions for Ben. That's the new one from Working Dog. It's very good.
Yeah.
But
I told you about Warhorse, didn't I? That Warhorse 2's planned and the horse will be flying a plane in the Second World War. It's,
I can't help you on Star Wars. I haven't seen it since Carrie Fisher had the
Really?
things in Harrison Ford. I think that was the first one, and that's it for me.
wearing donuts in her hair,
that
wasn't
was
she?
it.
Donuts.
Didn't go past
I'm not
that.
interested in it at all. So there you go, through to the keeper. All right,
Oh,
now
I'm going to go and see it. I want to go and buy a box set of 3D. Why not?
Shut up. All right, now Queensland has had a fantastic idea for a little while. New South Wales is about to copy. It's the idea of trains that have quiet carriages. Now, when I spoke to the head of Queensland Rail about this last year, about the idea of it moving into other states, he was very clear to say, now, it's just a little sign and people know that the front carriage and the back carriage, they're the shush carriages. That's it. Just people understand that's the system. There's no fines, there's no greater regulation, there's no rangers doing these things. Gary, I think it's a great idea. And also, I like that it works because people just understand if you want to carry on, just don't do it here.
Yeah, no, and it's good, and I hope they bring in a swear-free zone as well, too.
Let's not get too silly, please.
As the train gets later in the night, the louds swear louder, I think. But no, the idea of a shush carriage is terrific. There is a mute switch on your mobile phone, allegedly, supposedly.
Oh, supposedly. But my favourite is that when people think they need to yell louder into their phone in order for them to be heard at the other end.
Well,
Janine, what do you think of the idea?
From Europe where they have these, and I mean the English is so polite, of course they do it, the Germans, they went with the thing. I just worry that a little sign, I mean that takes a civil society to abide by it. It only takes one jerk to go the other way, but of course we all want quiet.
But I hold
means you can read newspapers, old media.
But exactly. But I hold out that idea that while we're talking about how the standards of this and that have changed, I like the idea that there would be a space where if you don't want to be as loud as everyone else, you do it. And I think these things work because I think people do largely self-police in these situations because you can't afford to be irritated by noise if you're in the middle. If you take the effort to go to the shush bit, then I think it will self-police itself. I think it works.
Could you join me in a ban on mobiles on planes then? Because I'm terrified.
Well, this is the thing. You know that there was a lot of talk about this, is that the technology will exist that you won't be able to make a phone call, but you would be able to SMS. Somehow, I don't understand how there's a great difference in all of that.
A phone call.
That can't happen.
It cannot have. Must be stopped now.
That is not allowed to happen. All right, the other thing, a couple of things to race through here too, was that Kylie Minogue basically outed to her million followers on Twitter that she had a bit of a stalker and that she has now decided to pass on some threatening things that have been said online to her directly to police. Now, the way that Twitter works, and I've said it a million times before, is that, my personal one is at PM on air. Say it all the time on the air. That goes directly to my mobile phone. I have effectively now told you a way of getting in touch with me directly, which is what Twitter is. For the first time in a long time, you don't have somebody who vets the letters or has a look. You're able to get directly in. I'm always surprised when celebrities might think that people are abusive directly to you, Gary, particularly with something like Twitter. And my policy is always, if you get rough, I will forward it on to the police and I will block you if you're a bit of a douche.
Yeah, and fair enough too. And I get my emails and everything all go through to mobile phones, and so now I've told everyone how to contact me as well. But look, and I read them. I mean, that's the point, I guess. And I try to get back to people as possible. I don't really play in the Twitterverse, Paul, because I just have a view that you can, be too contactable. But anyway, others like you are brave and bold and won't watch Star Wars in 3D, but you'll play on Twitter. So again,
I've taken quite.
I'm in awe of you, brother.
I've taken a few stances tonight. I was told, I'm talking about. We've done our politics for the day. We'll swim at the shallow end for a little while here. Is that what do you think about it though? Is that thing where celebrities seem surprised?
I wouldn't even give them a second go. I look at some of the Twitters we get here. I'd be blocking them. I mean, there's a couple I'd be blocked right now. But
I'm with Janine actually on second thoughts. I agree with 100% what she said.
Yeah. All right, and just finally here, I like the My Family stickers that are on the back of cars. A lot of people don't. I think they're fantastic. Anyway, there's been a bit of an interesting debate. The Courier Mail in Brisbane has talked about this, about whether these stickers are unsafe. These are the little ones where you have the sticker for mum, dad and all of the kids. Gary, you'd see quite a few of these things around Brisbane. They've sold more than 1 million. Are they unsafe on the back of a car? I don't think so.
I'm just getting bored to tears by them all. I mean, I think the most unique one I've seen is where there's dad and the kids on one side of the windscreen and mum and the house on the other, but I could be wrong. Look, they do disclose. Look, they just... We tell too many things about ourselves to everybody. We should take out a billboard to say, you know, married with 5 children, a dog and a goldfish, and... we put it on Facebook, we put it on Twitter. For God's sake, can we have some privacy? You know, can we have a shush carriage wherever we go, where we just don't tell people stuff about ourselves?
I hated baby on board stickers. They were years ago. That was bad enough.
All right, guys, thank you very much. Thank you to Gary. We'll see you again. All the best with the throat, mate. And Janine, all the best. We'll see you again in a couple of days. All right, you can follow me on Twitter directly, personally. Let's chat. It is @PM On Air. See you later. Sharon's got the latest news, and I'll see you tomorrow night here on Sky News.